Today we're diving into a fascinating study that kicks off with a pretty simple question, but believe me, it ends with an answer that is totally unexpected, almost a paradox. We're going to look at what the researchers found, but maybe more importantly, we'll see how one specific statistical tool was the absolute key to unlocking the real human story that was hiding inside the data. So it all starts in Guangzhou, China. Researchers there wanted to get a handle on attitudes toward disability. They decided to survey three really important groups: people with disabilities themselves, their caregivers, and of course, the general public. And that led them to one central burning question.
So what's your gut feeling? Who do you think it is? A lot of people might assume, that people actually living with a disability would have the toughest, most negative view. Others might point a finger at the general public, maybe thinking about social stigma. But as we're about to see, the initial data, well, it doesn't even come close to telling the whole story.
Right out of the gate, the researchers hit a massive roadblock. They looked at the raw data and just saw that these three groups were so fundamentally different from each other that comparing them directly was, well, it was just impossible. It created a huge statistical problem. And this slide just lays it out perfectly. Just look at the age gap. The public sample was way younger, while the caregivers were the oldest by a long shot. And education levels? Totally different worlds. So how on earth can you fairly compare their attitudes when their life experiences are just completely different? Exactly. It's the classic apples and oranges problem. Any comparison you make is just going to be flawed from the start. The differences you see in their attitudes could be because of their age or their education and have nothing to do with their actual relationship to disability. To get to the real truth, the researchers had to find a way to level the playing field.
And this right here is where the methodology becomes the hero of our story. To make a truly fair comparison, the researchers turned to this really powerful statistical tool that's designed for exactly this kind of mess.
That tool is called ANCOVA. Now don't worry about the math. What's really important is just understanding what it does. Think of it like a handicap in a race. It statistically adjusts for all those pre-existing differences like age and education, so you can isolate the one thing you actually care about: their attitude toward disability. So here's how it works in practice. ANCOVA basically asks a cool what-if question. It says, okay, what would these attitude scores look like if everyone in all three groups was the same age, had the same education, and so on? By controlling for those variables, it lets you finally make a true, honest-to-goodness, apples-to-apples comparison. Okay, so with that level playing field finally established, what did the data actually show? The answer was a complete shock. Let's take a look at the adjusted scores. Would you look at that? After adjusting for all those demographic differences, the group with the most negative attitude was the caregivers. And amazingly, people with disabilities held the most positive attitude of all three groups. That is a result that would have been totally invisible without using ANCOVA. The study's authors spell it out right here. This wasn't some tiny, insignificant difference. It was a statistically significant finding that just completely flipped common assumptions on their head. It points to a story that's not really about the disability itself, but about the entire experience surrounding it. And believe it or not, it gets even more interesting. The study also found that the longer a person lived with their disability, the more positive their attitude actually became, which suggests a kind of adaptation over time. But for caregivers, the complete opposite was true. The longer they provided care, the more negative their attitude grew. These two groups were on totally different emotional paths. So what is going on here? Why on earth would caregivers, who are usually the closest family members, have the most negative views? Well, the answer isn't about a lack of love or empathy. It's about burden. And this number explains so much. Over 90% of the caregivers in this study were family members. We're talking parents, spouses, or kids. These are not paid professionals. They're loved ones providing round-the-clock, unpaid care. The context here is absolutely everything. In China, the system often puts the entire weight of caregiving on the family. These caregivers face just enormous financial and psychological strain for, on average, almost 18 years. Their negative attitude isn't a reflection on the person they love and care for, but it's a symptom of a system that places this overwhelming burden on their shoulders with very little support. And that is the real takeaway here. Without the right methodology, the researchers would have completely missed the real story. ANCOVA let them see past all the messy, noisy data and uncovered the very human struggle of these family caregivers.
It proved that their negative attitude wasn't about a lack of love, but a direct result of immense, unsupported pressure.
So, in the end, this study pushes us to ask a much bigger question. It shifts our focus away from judging attitudes and toward understanding what causes them. Because if the system is what's creating this incredible burden, then maybe it's the system, not the people, that needs to change. And that's a powerful question to think about long after this is over.